And Nick Eberstadt is one of the world's leading demographers, and he has just published a new volume out this week featuring high-impact research and commentary tackling America's growing social disorder. The book is called America's Human Arithmetic. America's Human Arithmetic seeks to answer a question: why that disconnect between that unparalleled wealth and global power for the U.S. and the dissatisfaction on the part of so much of our population? Nick, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to the show.
Thank you for having me back, Michael.
What a pleasure. Okay, big question. You write about male loneliness, as the book makes very clear. How can there be male loneliness? How can that be a more fervent concern than female loneliness? If males are lonely, why aren't females similarly lonely? What is the difference?
Males have been demonstrating this unsettling trend. It goes back a couple of generations, but it's really pretty acute now, of disproportionately more than women, disconnecting from work, disconnecting from family, disconnecting from communities.
How do you mean disconnecting from work?
There's been a long-term flight from work by men in the prime of the working ages of life. If you were to take a look at the most recent jobs report, you would be astonished to see that the percentage of men, of prime age men, with paid employment, and that could be as little as 1 hour a week, the work rate of these prime age men is basically no higher than it was the first time it was measured in early 1940 at the tail end of the Great Depression. Despite our extraordinary prosperity and all of the education and advantage we have as a society, we have a late Depression scale work problem for men.
And why not for women?
Women have fared much better in our modern society than men have, in part because they've been more naturally connected to children and family. It's been apparently more optional for men, in part because they've been more motivated and more successful at integrating into our new modern economy. It's not all kittens and roses for American women either, Michael. We've got a bookend to the 7 million dropout men, which are about 3.5 million dropout women who are neither working or looking for work, who don't have kids at home, who aren't currently married, and their patterns of life, their patterns of pain pill use, are scarily similar to the dropout men. So we're getting a little bit of gender equality there as well, but men are the leading indicators in this dysfunction.
Okay, when you look at dysfunction among men and where it occurs among women, are there regions of the country that are particularly afflicted by some of these problems? And if so, why those places?
That's a fascinating question. I wish that more of our describers and deciders were posing that question, Michael. I've done a little bit of homework on that, and it's in this book, America's Human Arithmetic. There's been a big change from the past. We think of regional failures. We think of the Deep South or Appalachia or the Rust Belt as being the sort of types of regional problems that we see. Nowadays, about 3/4 of the gap in work rates or labor force participation, we could use other things too, are found within states. They're not between regions. It's mostly happening within states. Sometimes 20 or 30 percentage points difference in work rates between counties that are 50 miles away from each other within the same state. And so one of the I can point this out. I can show this on a map. I can show this with my nerd statistics. But what we really need is journalists worthy of the name who do the leather and actually go and talk to human beings and see why we have such extraordinary gaps. Um, I mean, I've got some general ideas about this that I share. I mean, one of the things which we see is that uh, seemingly the healthiest communities in the country tend disproportionately to be in the upper Midwest, which by no coincidence, I'd argue, is the area where you had the big migration of the Northern Europeans from Scandinavia, from the Netherlands, some from Germany. I think there's some kind of afterglow of those communities which had some sort of glue to them. The, the communities that are doing the very worst are scattered all over the U.S., basically in the South, from sea to shining sea. And there are a lot of differences among them. My colleague Mike Barone likens this to Tolstoy's adage that happy families are all the same and unhappy families are different each in their own way. There's a lot of investigation that needs to be done to uh, understand what's gone wrong, and that's part of why we're where we are now in America, is because there's been a strange disinterest by our ameliorative classes, by our problem-solving government, problem-solving academy, intelligentsia, in the real troubles that Americans are having outside of the bubble.
There have been many reports that are somewhat alarming about the very sharp drop off in religious participation. And I know elsewhere and in your work, I have noted particularly that you talk about the positive impact of the communities that can be formed around faith based institutions. First of all, what is the main reason for the crisis that currently exists in terms of religious affiliation? And what can be done to try to encourage that kind of community building?
Well, I guess the best I can say, Michael, is that the United States is late to the party. We're seeing these plummeting uh, reports on religiosity in the United States, which still leaves us as a very much more um, religious society than our counterparts in Europe. I mean, Israel is the remarkable exception in the world still today, but we seem to be following this. What can I call it? This trend towards neo-paganism that we are seeing in Europe, and we shouldn't be surprised when we see all of the sorts of nihilistic uh, works that come along with this. We could start by having um, people in their own communities and by people in political life and elsewhere just state the obvious that religion is part of what completes one's life in in the search for truth and meaning in the world. There are so many lonely, isolated, especially young people in America who are searching for something, and they haven't found the thing that fills that hole where meaning has to go. Religion does that, and it does it for a reason. You know, it's part of our greater natural law, I'd say.
Is there a connection between, because you write also about the rise in populism? First of all, defining populism for the wider audience. But secondly, is that rise in populism related in some way to the decline of traditional religious faith?
That's a very good question, and I think we can see uh, that the rise in distrust of our existing institutions, the lack of confidence in civil, political, business organizations, um, has something, it's somehow related to the flight from religion as well. I'd say that our government and our elites, if you want to use that word in the United States, bear some responsibility here as well, because despite the seeming information explosion that we're living in the midst of, people who are, decision makers in politics and in business and elsewhere have less connection with ordinary people than in the past, less empathy for ordinary people in the past. We've got this government that's supposed to be solving all of our problems, and it didn't realize we were in the midst of this opioid explosion or this shift towards this terrible trend towards deaths of despair for about 20 years. Um, it still doesn't realize that we've got tens of millions of ex-cons in the United States who aren't in jail, who are in society as a whole. Probably 1 in 7 adult men today has a felony conviction in his background. You're not going to hear that in our political discourse. You're not going to hear that from our foundations or from the academy, because these are basically people that are kind of outside the zone of concern for our decision makers. And if you wanted to get a populist reaction, that sort of an empathy gap is a pretty good way to get it started.
That's in terms of the immigration challenges in the United States. Uh, Immigrants, as I understand it, and I believe your work includes this, are not disproportionately represented among these people who are disconnected from the mainstream of society because of criminal activity.
We've got a very different immigrant profile from Europe. We're very lucky in that regard. Uh, on the whole, immigrants who come to the United States are more, they want to come here, they want to succeed, they want to assimilate, they want to become loyal and productive new Americans. That's why our country looks like it does. We've been doing that for a while. Uh, Immigrants today, I'm talking in particular about foreign-born men, no matter what their educational level, no matter what their ethnic background, they're more likely to be at work or looking for a job than their native-born counterparts.
Wow.
They're motivated. They're motivated to become Americans. There are criminals among them. I mean, there are certainly criminals among them, and we have to be a lot more vigilant about that. But on the whole, we've had a fantastic success with assimilation for the waves of people who have come into the United States over the last number of years, when we had this horrible, unnecessary experiment with the open southern border. We got some of what you'd expect. And I'm afraid that the Biden administration was brilliant in poisoning public support for immigration. It may take a long time to get that bad taste out of our mouth.
In terms of governance, in the brief time that we have left, what would be the top priority for a better, more constructive, more healing course for our top leadership?
We'd have to recognize what government can't do to begin with. Um, government Government can't bring families back together. It can't encourage religion. Or rather, if it tries to, it'll have terrifying consequences. There are things that we have to encourage from our local communities, from what we'd call subsidiarity. What government can do is it can talk the truth. It can speak about real problems in the United States, even if it can't solve them. It can encourage people to do that. It can encourage research and development. It can try to improve the quality of schooling. If communities were allowed to fire bad teachers and reward better teachers, that might do more than any other single policy metric that we could put our finger on.
And that I know would involve some expansion of choice in education, educational choice for parents, would it not?
Absolutely, would have to. So it would be stepping back as well as stepping in.
And again, I know that there have been various states, and you write about this, that have had some success with programs of enhanced educational choice. We had talked a moment ago about populism. In the brief time we have left, how do you define populism, and what should raise caution flags regarding that political orientation?
Populism goes back a long way in the United States, and it is a sort of an anti-elite impulse, I guess I would say. And it big state. It tends to be big state. It tends to be uh, isolationist. It doesn't have to be. I think what we would say is that um, if if there is an alternative model to populism that seems to be attractive, if we can see what the basics of the U.S. Constitution, the free market order, the rule of law have to offer us, then I think that the mistrust that generates populist impulses will probably attenuate. But you
Let
can't
us
beat something with
let
nothing.
let us hope that we move in the right direction. And not necessarily right as opposed to left, but the proper and fitting and constructive direction. America's human arithmetic. Nick Eberstadt writes about how it all should and could add up. You can find the book easily at michaelmedved.com, In This Greatest Nation on God's Green Earth.